Greetings to you all. Today we are going to talk about conflict resolution. What is conflict resolution and its three-step model? Conflict resolution is the process by which two or more parties reach a peaceful resolution to a dispute. In the workplace, there can be a variety of types of conflict. Conflict may occur between co-workers, between supervisors and subordinates, or between service providers and their clients or customers. Conflict can also occur between groups such as management and the labor force, or between entire departments. Some conflicts are essentially arbitrary, meaning it doesn't matter who wins, only that the problem is resolved so everyone can get back to work. But some conflicts reflect real disagreements about how an organization should function. The conflict resolution process. The resolution of conflicts in the workplace typically involves some or all of the following processes. Recognition by the parties involved that a problem exists. Mutual agreement to address the issue and find some resolution. An effort to understand the perspective and concerns of the opposing individual or group. Identifying changes in attitude, behavior, and approaches to work by both sides that will lessen negative feelings. Recognizing triggers to episodes of conflict. Interventions by third parties such as human resources representatives or higher level managers to mediate. A willingness by one or both parties to compromise. Agreement on a plan to address differences. Monitoring the impact of any agreements for change. Disciplining or terminating employees who resist efforts to diffuse conflicts. Types of conflict resolution skills. Assertiveness. A supervisor might take the initiative to convene a meeting between two employees who have engaged in a public dispute. An employee might seek out a person with whom they are having conflict to suggest working together to find ways to coexist more peacefully. Articulation, balanced approach, decisiveness, delegation, fact-based, fairness, firmness, leadership, managing emotions, management, negotiation, socializing, voicing opinions, problem solving, self-control, stress management. Conflict, arguments, and change are natural parts of our lives, as well as the lives of every agency, organization, and nation. Conflict resolution is a way for two or more parties to find a peaceful solution to a disagreement among them. The disagreement may be personal, financial, political, or emotional. When a dispute arises, often the basic cause of action is negotiation to resolve the disagreement. The goals of negotiation are to produce a solution that all parties can agree to work as quickly as possible to find this solution, to improve, not hurt, the relationship between the groups in conflict. Conflict resolution through negotiation can be good for all parties involved. Often each side will get more by participating in negotiating than they would by walking away. And it can be a way for your group to get resources that might otherwise be out of reach. Reasons for conflict resolution. The main goal of negotiation with your opposition is to come to an agreement that benefits all parties. Some other good reasons to negotiate are to understand more about those whose ideas, beliefs, and backgrounds may be different from your own. In order to resolve a conflict, you will need to look at the conflict from your opponent's point of view and learn more about this person or group's perspective and motivations. To ensure that your relationships with opponents continue and grow, if you make peace with your opponents, you increase your own allies in the community. Successful negotiations pursue the way for smooth relationships in the future. To find peaceful solutions to difficult situations, full-blown battles use up resources, time, energy, good reputation, motivation. By negotiating, you avoid wasting these resources, and you may actually make new allies and find new resources. When to resolve conflict. Conflict resolution is appropriate for almost any disagreement. Our daily lives offer plenty of opportunities for negotiation between parents and children, co-workers, friends, etc. And as a result, you probably already have a variety of effective strategies for resolving minor conflicts. But for more serious conflicts between groups rather than individuals, you may need some additional skills. How, for example, should you structure a meeting between your group and your opponent? When should you settle and when should you fight for more? How should you react if your opponent attacks you personally? How should you resolve conflict? There are 7 steps for successfully negotiating the resolution of a conflict. Understand the conflict. Communication with the opposition. Brainstorm possible resolutions. Choose the best resolution. Use a third-party mediator. Explore alternatives and cope with stressful situations and pressure tactics. Number 1, understand the conflict. Conflict arises for a variety of different reasons. It is important for you to define clearly your own position and interest in the conflict and to understand those of your opponent. Here are some questions to ask yourself so that you can better define the conflict. Interests. What are my interests? What do I really care about in this conflict? What do I want? What do I need? What are my concerns, hopes, fears? Possible outcomes. What kinds of agreements might we reach? Legitimacy. What third party outside of the conflict might convince one or both of us that a proposed agreement is a fair one? What objective standard might convince us that an agreement is fair? For example, a law, an expert opinion, the market value of the transaction. Is there a presented that would convince us that an agreement is fair? Their interests. What are the interests of my opposition? If I were in their shoes, what would I really care about in this conflict? What do they want? What do they need? What are their concerns, hopes, and fears? Interests play an important role in better understanding conflict. Often groups waste time bargaining over positions instead of explaining what the interests of their position are. They argue about their bottom line. This is not a useful way to negotiate because it forces groups to stick to one narrow position. Once they are entrenched in particular position, it will be embarrassing for them to abandon it. They may spend more effort on saving face than on actually finding a suitable resolution. It is usually more helpful to explore the group's interests and then see what positions suit such interests. Example: your parent group wants the local high school to change its American history textbook. You feel that the textbook doesn't represent the history of African Americans, Latin, or Asian Americans in the US adequately. You come to the school committee and say, the only textbook that works for us is the people of the United States, and that's final. You have presented a position rather than your interests. By drawing a bottom line, you are stuck in one position. If you don't convince the school committee to choose this textbook, you will lose. A more effective way to approach the school committee would be to state your interests. You might say, we are concerned about the anti-representation of racial minorities in the current U.S. history textbook and would like to find an alternative. By communicating your interests rather than one position, you are leaving some room to negotiate while still being firm and clear about your goals. Often, the same interest can have many positions. For example, the school committee might vote to supplement the history textbook with a packet of articles about minorities, 8 mandatory units on slavery, the Harlem Renaissance, and Japanese internment camps, or offer a new course about minorities in America. These are different positions that addresses the same interest. Communicate with the opposition. That's another point. Now that you have thought through your own interests and those of the other party, you can begin to communicate directly with your opposition. Here are some tips for productive talks. Listen. Their opinions are important to you because their opinions are the source of your conflict. If something is important to them, you need to recognize this. Recognizing does not mean agreeing, of course. Let everyone participate who wants to. People who participate will have a stake in a resolution. They will want to find a good compromise. Talk about your strong emotions. Let the other side let off steam. Don't, however, react to emotional outbursts. Try an apology instead of yelling back. Apologizing is not costly and is often a rewarding technique. Be an active listener. Rephrase what you are hearing as a question. Let me see if I am following you. You are saying that, if I got that right? You can still be firm when you are listening. Speak about yourself, not the other party. In the textbook example, you might say, I feel angry to know that my children are reading this old-fashioned textbook, rather than, how could you choose such a racist book? Be concrete but flexible. Speak about your interests, not about your position. Avoid early judgments. Keep asking questions and gathering information. Don't tell the opposition it's up to you to solve your problems. Work to find a solution for everyone. Find a way to make their decision easy. Try to find a way for them to take your position without looking weak, but don't call it a way for them to save face. Egos are important in negotiations. Brainstorm possible resolutions. Now that you know that the interests of both parties are, and how to better communicate with the opposition, you can start thinking about solutions. Look at all of the interests you have for you and for your opponents, and look for common interests. Often both parties share many interests. For example, both groups may want stability and public respect. Before you hold a brainstorming meeting, think carefully about how you set up the meeting. Try to choose a small group of 5 to 8 people total. Hold the meeting in a different environment from your usual setting. Make sure the setting is an informal one where people feel comfortable and safe. Find an unbiased facilitator, someone who can structure the meeting without sharing his or her own feelings about the conflict. To begin brainstorming, decide whether you want to brainstorm with your opposition or with only your group. In either case, you want to establish some group rules. Work on coming up with as many ideas as possible. Don't judge or criticize the ideas yet. That might prevent people from thinking creatively. Try to maximize, not minimize, your opinions. Look for win-win solutions or compromises in which both parties get something they want. Find a way to make their decision easy. During the meeting, sit people side by side, facing the problem. A blank chalkboard or large pad of paper for writing down ideas. The facilitator will remind people of the purpose of the meeting, review the ground rules, and ask participants to agree to those rules. During the brainstorming session, the facilitator will write down ideas on the chalkboard or pad. Choose the best resolution. After the meeting, you will need to decide which resolution is best. Review your brainstorm's ideas. Star the best ideas. These are what you work with during the conflict resolution process. Set a time to discuss them and determine which idea is the best. The goal here is to use both groups' skills and resources to get the best result for everyone. Which resolution is probably the best one? Use a third-party mediator. As you are brainstorming and choosing a good resolution, you may want to use a third-party mediator. This is a person who is not from your group or your opponent's group, but whom you both trust to be fair. Your mediator can help both sides agree upon a standard by which you will judge your resolution. Standards are a way to measure your agreement. They include expert opinions, law, precedent, the way things have been done in the past, and accepted the principles. For example, let's say you are building a new playground for your town's elementary school. You disagree with the superintendent about what kinds of materials you use to build the playground. The superintendent wants to use chemical treated wood, but you feel it's unsafe. A mediator might read the current guidelines of the lumber industry and tell you which kinds of wood are considered safe for children. Maybe you and the superintendent who agree to follow the lumber industry's advice. In their words, to use that as the standard. Your mediator could also, for example, run your brainstorming session. Here are some other possible jobs for a mediator: setting ground rules for you and your opponent to agree upon. For example, you might both agree not to publicly discuss the dispute, creating an appropriate setting for meetings, suggesting possible ways to compromise, being an ear for both sides' anger and fear, listen to both sides and explaining their positions to one another, finding the interest behind each side's position, looking for win-win alternatives, keeping both parties focused, reasonable and respectful, preventing any party from feeling that it's losing face. Writing the draft of your agreement with the opposition. Perhaps Helen is considering quitting her job because her boss wants to transfer her to another office. The mediator might say, "It sounds like Helen doesn't care about transferring to the downtown office. What she's worried about is losing rank. Helen, do you agree with that? Miss Patel, do you understand Helen's concern? How can we assure Helen that she won't lose rank if she agrees to transfer?" Explore alternatives. There may be times when, despite your hard work and goodwill, you cannot find an acceptable resolution to your conflict. You need to think about this possibility before you begin negotiations. At what point will you decide to walk away from negotiations? What are your alternatives if you cannot reach an agreement with your opponent? It is important that you brainstorm your alternatives to resolution early on in the negotiation process, and that you always have your best alternative somewhere in the back of your mind. As you consider possible agreements with your opponent, compare them to this best alternative. If you don't know what the alternative is, you'll be negotiating without all the necessary information. In order to come up with an alternative, start by brainstorming. Then consider the pros and cons of each alternative. Think about which alternative is realistic and practical. Also think about how you can make it even better. At the same time, don't forget to put yourself in the shoes of your opposition. What alternatives might they have? Why might they choose them? What can you do to make your choice better than their alternative? That is called BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Cope with stressful situations and pressure tactics. You need to be prepared to negotiate with all kinds of opponents, both reasonable and unreasonable. What if your opponent is more powerful and influential than you are? What if they refuse to meet or talk with you? All of these situations are stressful and intended to put extra pressure on you to make a quick decision in the opposition's favor. When a situation like this takes place, stay calm and go slow. Don't get angry or make a rushed decision. Instead, talk about the pressure tactic without judging. Here are some possible situations. My opponent is more powerful. If you have already decided on your best alternative, you have nothing to fear. You can walk away at any time and go that route instead. Think about everything that you can do and that your mediator can do. Although you can be less powerful, at least you'll be negotiating with all the available information. My opponent won't budge. In a situation like this, you may be tempted to do the same thing. If you won't change your mind, neither will I. However, you will fall if you insist on sticking to your position. Instead, treat your opponent's position as a real possibility. Ask lots of questions, listen to their logic, understand what their interests are and what it is that they really want. Learn what their criticisms of your idea are. The more you know about where they are coming from, the better a resolution you can create. In conflict resolution, the best solution is the solution that is best for both sides. Of course, that's not always possible to find, but you should use all your resources to solve your conflicts as smoothly as you can. Conflict resolution step models. Every team experiences conflict, whether it's a battle for control or a clash of priorities or just a difference in understanding. Some degree of conflict is a fact of life in most work groups, civic organizations, neighborhoods, or even families for that matter. Many conflicts are quickly resolved with little effort, part of the everyday give and take of group life. But some require intervention. Most of the leaders, even those who are the most serious about leadership, dread becoming involved in conflict resolution, and with good reason. It's a challenging process and the stakes are often high, but it's a situation where procrastination can be enormously destructive as tensions deepen and people take sides. From a more positive perspective, to get the most benefit, how you resolve conflict is as important as the outcome. Even though the process is usually carried out privately, its influence will be highly visible within your team. A simple 3-step method works well in most situations. Resolving conflict is an opportunity to strengthen your entire team by demonstrating principles of compromise and collaborative solutions. Listen. Begin by gathering information from each party separately. Remember that these discussions are frequently stressful to the person being questioned, and keep the tone professional but not hostile. Ensure you have privacy and an understandable undisturbed block of time. You also want to take notes because the act of recording interviews has a negative effect and may limit candor. Focus your attention as carefully as possible to hear what's being said, but also to realize what isn't being said, and to pick up a tone and body language. From the beginning, be clear about confidentiality and other considerations which may vary depending on the situation and your organization. For example, issues involving possible discrimination or harassment may fall under specific guidelines. For conflicts without such special requirements, emphasize to everyone involved that the process is about discovering where expectations and communication have broken down so they can be repaired. Often just allowing each part to feel they are being heard and understood will go far in calming a situation. Discern. Once you have gathered information and put some serious thought into understanding the situation, the most helpful exercise may be to put yourself in the role of each party, asking, if I were this person, what would the best outcome be? Pay particular attention to balancing priorities and needs and ensuring that any divisions of responsibility and sacrifice are equitable. You may want to bring in an HR professional or a senior administrator for advice, or consult an outside source to validate your understanding and direction. Act. Once you have decided on a resolution, call both parties together and present your understanding of the conflict together with the proposed resolution. You may wish to leave some points open to be decided during the course of the meeting to give each party ownership in the solution and allow them to begin rebuilding a working relationship. If appropriate, include a timeline for following up to keeping things on track. If the plan involves a change in roles or responsibilities, you may also want to discuss how that information will be shared with the entire team. Conflict management is probably never going to be something leaders look forward to doing, but if it's done well, the positive effect on your team's levels of trust and morale will make the effort well worth your time. May God bless you and continue to bless you in your conflict resolution. In Jesus' name, amen.